بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم أما بعد فقد قال عز وجل بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قد أفلح من تزكى صدق الله العظيم. After Asr inshallah, every day we're going to try and very briefly just say something which improves us internally, spiritually, makes us better people, makes us closer to Allah. Last Wednesday, not yesterday, but the week before, we spoke about a topic called Muhasabah, and we mentioned a book there as well, which is called Muhaasabahtun Nafs. The author is Ibn Abid Dunya, who is a very, very big hadith scholar. So he was at the time of Imam Bukhari, rahimahullah. That's one of those students. So he was a student of Imam Bukhari and also many big hadith scholars at that time. He wrote amazing works on hadith. He was an amazing hadith scholar. Specifically, he would get those hadith which other scholars wouldn't always narrate, and he would bring them. And he was also, when somebody does that, it's very important for them to be trusted, because otherwise the hadith is not taken. So he was very trusted, very accepted. And Ibn Abid Dunya, he's written the book called Muhaasabahtun Nafs, which is a beautiful book. And there's so many lessons which we take. Also, the thing I like about the book, and the reason I've chosen the book, inshallah we'll try and finish the book throughout Ramadan. Obviously because it's short, it's not too long. It's just, about it's about 100 pages, 100 sides, so not too long. So easily we can inshallah quickly go through all of the topics he mentions, and we can try and benefit from that. And Ibn Abid Dunya, he was born, Imam Bukhari was born at the end of the 2nd century, and he was born at the beginning of the 3rd century, just in the year 208. And he was very, very accepted. This is one thing about Ibn Abid Dunya, that he was accepted by all of the scholars across the world. The book is called Muhaasabahtun Nafs, and this book is one of a series. The reason I said I've chosen this book is because books about spirituality, about becoming better people, becoming closer to Allah, are very, very, very common. Ibn al-Qayyim is very, very famous for this. He came at the time, in his time, and he wrote so many books regarding this. He diverted everyone's attention back towards spirituality. He wrote a book called Madarij al-Salikin on the tafsir of Surah Fatiha, and by writing that book on the tafsir of Surah Fatiha, he spoke about Iyyaka na'budu, how we worship you alone. And this ibadah, he spoke about how this shows that we all need to have a connection with Allah. He transformed the way people understood this kind of thing, and then people read this book, and then we find that as a result of these kind of works, people came back to this kind of way of thinking. It's very important from a basic Islamic perspective. The point of Islam was to connect all of us to Allah. So if we focus on our own souls, our own spirituality, our own connection with Allah, our connection with the Quran, our connection with our salah, how is our salah? Do we actually end up feeling a connection with Allah? All of these things, when we keep these in mind, what we realize is how every one of us as individuals actually needs to focus on our own relation with Allah. Very often we get carried away in the world. We think of everyone else. We worry too much about everyone else. Usually, very often we see other people doing things, and then we become very, very worried about why they're doing this, why he's saying this organization doing this, these people praying like this, these people they visiting the graveyard like this. Different things we think about other people, but we don't analyze ourselves in the same way. So one thing which books like this, what they do, is they bring their attention back towards ourselves. This is one of the most important things. So just to begin with the Muqaddamah, which is actually written by the person who he done tahqiq on the book, he done research on the book. And just very briefly we'll start off with how he starts talking about this book. He starts by praising Allah and sending salutations onto the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he makes dua that رَبَّنَا لَا تُزِغْ قُلُوبَنَا بَعْدَ إِذْ هَدَيْتَنَا وَهَبْ لَنَا مِن لَدُنْكَ رَحْمَةً إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْوَهَّابُ. Then he brings his first point. He said, لَمَّا كَانَتِ الدُّنْيَا الْغَرُورَةَ, when the world is full of deception, then تحاول إغراء المؤمنين بربهم الكريم. The aim of the dunya, and not just the dunya, everything within the dunya, very often it will aim to deceive us. If Allah describes the dunya itself as a deception, then the dunya, it will aim always to turn us away from our Rabb, our Allah. So he describes that it will turn you away from, every mu'min will be turned away from his very, very merciful and kind Rabb. This is one of the biggest issues that we'll have, that a person, he'll have iman, he'll be meant to trust Allah, he's meant to love Allah, but the dunya will not allow him to fully appreciate the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala presents himself. Even if we look at the verse in the Quran which comes straight after Allah talking about Ramadan, where Allah says, إِذَا سَأَلَكَ إِبَادِي عَنِّي, He addresses the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah addresses Rasulullah, and He says, إِذَا سَأَلَكَ إِبَادِي عَنِّي, whenever your slaves ask you about me, then what does Allah reply? فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. This is such a beautiful way Allah describes Himself, that people will come to you and they'll ask you about me. Allah says, Inni qareeb, I will be close to that person. He doesn't say, tell him that I'll be close. I automatically will become close to that person. فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. And then, ujibu da'wat ad-da'. And this is a very beautiful verse which we can repeat so many times just to appreciate the value of this verse. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala He says. And then the author continues, وَلَمَّا كَثُرَتِ الْفِتَنِ وَأَشْرَقَتْ إِلَى الْقُلُوبِ. When the things which cause problems, these kind of things, when they are always on the increase, and these things then come and affect the heart, and ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس. These are the kind of, he then highlights a series of problems that we have. That one of the first things that we have to do, which is based on muhasabah, is that we have to first identify that there's some kind of issue in my heart. There's some kind of room for improvement. We're not reached some kind of pinnacle. Because it's Ramadan, some of us are here. If it wasn't Ramadan, some of us wouldn't be here. So this kind of improvement, this chance for improvement, is something we have to value. The only way you can value it is if you actually have some kind of desire to improve. And the most important thing, to desire improvement, a person first has to realize his own faults, realize what's wrong with him. And also here he starts describing the world around us. He doesn't describe us as individuals. He describes the world around you will deceive you. The nature of the world is such that it will attempt to deceive you as much as possible. So we've got to be ready and somehow prepare ourselves for this. So this is one of the most important things which he talks about. And then he says, وَلَمَّا ابْتُلِيَ بِالدُّنْيَا. Then when the people in the world, they are tested by means of the dunya. So the world, it tests the people inside the dunya. And then فَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ صَبَرْ وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ تَحَتَّمَ وَأَخَذَتْهُ الدُّنْيا فِي تَيَارِهِ. Then there's two types of people. That at this point there'll be two types of people. There'll be some people, the test of the world is there for everyone. I mean, essentially everyone has 24 hours in a day. But some people are always too busy for certain things. Some people will never make time for them to be able to pray. Some people, genuinely, when you go to them and speak to them, it feels like this person is so busy that 5 times a day praying for him is impossible. For everyone else it's fine, but for him specifically it's impossible. This is how certain people are taken in, certain people are deceived. And this is the distinction which we have to make, that how perfect is my life, or how imperfect is my life. If we labor under a delusion that we're in some kind of perfection, it becomes impossible for us to be able to improve ourselves. So this is a very, very brief overview. Again, the book, the overview of the book, the title of the book, I forgot to mention the title of the book, Muhaasabahtun Nafs wal Isra alayha. Muhasabah, to take account of oneself, for a person to continuously take account. Now Ramadan is the perfect time for this kind of book, because we continuously need to be taking account. We can't forget where we are, we can't forget what happened last year, and we really don't want to forget how many days of Ramadan have passed. One day is gone. I mean, it may not seem like much. We may think, oh, there's still 29 or 28 days to go. But very soon there's not going to be. It's going to be the opposite. There's going to be one day left, and 28, 29 days are all going to have gone. So if daily we just remind ourselves that, look, what did we do yesterday? What have I done today? And then more importantly, that this actual connection, this focus on the nafs is really, really important. If we focus on other people and how they're praying and how they are doing their life, we'll divert away from ourselves. And this is never the maqsad of Sharia. Never was it the maqsad of Rasulullah and the Sahaba originally to focus on other people's faults. Islam was there for everyone to benefit from, but everyone was responsible for themselves. They were not forced, they were never requested to force other people to do things. Da'wah was there, and they'd encourage other people to do good, but fundamentally the aim was to change a person's life themselves. This is the optimistic aim. We don't worry if in this session which we have, if only one person turned up, or nobody turned up, I was here on my own, it doesn't mean that now this whole thing is a failure. It doesn't mean that the speaking is a failure. We're not responsible. If we have a larger turnout, if this whole mosque was full, it doesn't mean the speech is now better. It doesn't mean we're now successful as an organization. It doesn't mean that the mosque is doing better. We are not responsible for how many people attend. We are responsible for ourselves. So this is something we can always assess. We can't assess anyone else, ever. We don't know the condition of other people. We're only capable of assessing ourselves. But if we assess other people, unfortunately this diverts attention away from ourselves. And then it becomes very difficult to improve. If we're worried about why somebody else isn't improving, and everybody ends up doing that, then nobody improves themselves. And the real improvement is when we assess ourselves and improve ourselves. We know what we do with the 24 hours in the day and what we've done with the last 24 hours. So only we can improve that. So again, inshallah, we'll go deeper into this book, inshallah. And I make dua Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives me and all of us the ability to understand and act upon what has been said. And brothers are welcome. Questions are always welcome as well. Questions are very important. Especially in the after Dhuhr as well, but even today I'll try and remind brothers as well, whenever somebody has a question, you're welcome to ask it. In the middle, interrupt and stop if it's relevant, and at the end again, any kind of questions brothers are welcome to ask, inshallah. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillah rabbil alamin.
Yeah, what does your Muslim name?
Oh, okay, so this is a very important question. This happens all the time. I remember last time, brother, we had Jayden after Jummah, the brother with the tattoos, he embraced Islam as well. This is a cultural thing generally, which I've seen in many cultures, that when somebody becomes, because we in this country we differentiate ourselves from somebody else by names. But in reality, at the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if you think of Islam when it started, nobody was Muslim until the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam came with Islam, and then all of the Sahaba were Muslims. But it's very rare, very, very rare that you find that a Sahabi changed his name. Very rare. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ, he was very explicit in his hadith. He would, if you open, even, I'm not sure about Bukhari, but if you open books like, hadith books like Tirmidhi, there'll be books on there which discuss the names or the name changing of the Prophet ﷺ. So the Prophet ﷺ, for example, very famous hadith that I can't remember the Arabic, the most beloved name to Allah is Abdullah and Abdul Rahman. So he speaks very openly about names and good names and bad. And the other hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he mentions that if the Prophet ﷺ saw a bad name, a name with a bad meaning, then he would change it. So somebody was called Asiya, if somebody, which means to be disobedient. So he changed. He said, you should have a good name. Somebody had a name which meant misfortune and calamity. So the Prophet said it from misfortune to be like Sa'id, to be fortunate. So if it was a bad name, he changed the name. But if it's a normal name, like if somebody's called Jeremy or James or Jack or anything like this, then there wouldn't generally be any kind of emphasis. Otherwise, Umar radiallahu anh, Abu Bakr, even though this wasn't his name, but a lot of the names, they were not changed. Even if you look at the names of the Sahaba, they generally were not changed. So it's not something which is emphasized. The one reason in this country, when somebody becomes a Muslim, they might change their name, is to identify as a Muslim more easily. But again, that's not necessary if they don't want to. I hope that answers the question. Barakallahu feek.